Hello, folks, and welcome to First Aid Spray, a podcast and content creation team made by fans for fans. Every now and then, we like to step away from our usual topics and open the floor for broader discussions. We call these a moment of relief. With cloud gaming gaining traction, new consoles on the horizon, and graphical fidelity reaching unprecedented levels of detail, I thought it would be a great time to open up a dialogue about the term next gen in big quotation marks. Joining me today to discuss its future, its past, and everything in between are two of my favorite people, Mr. KDB.
Is it too late to say Happy New Year, James?
I don't know if we can go back in time. Everybody put their PlayStation clocks back in time, okay?
Depends if you're a patron or not, you see, because if you're not a patron, then it's going to be definitely really late.
Oh, yeah, true. Also, Sai's here.
I'm here. I'm on the other side of the fence. It's weird over here. Cozy, though.
This is a topic that I've wanted to tackle for almost a year, and I keep, poking everybody. I kept poking everybody in the admin chat. I was like, oh, I want to do this, but yeah, every time I go back to the drawing board, countless times, even if my own head, as it can be quite a polarizing discussion to have on the internet, and that's putting it really lightly. However, I think it's best for us to start from our beginnings and unpack the meaning of the words next generation, because I don't know if you know, guys, but that's what gen means. After all, the three of us, we have a really wide range of examples over the years, as we are very old. My knees are feeling it anyway. So I'm going to open up first with Sai.
Mm-hmm.
What does next gen mean to you today, and how has it evolved for you over the years?
I think at this point, it's just kind of expected moniker, sort of part of the furniture nomenclature kind of thing that we just arbitrarily say. And I'm very curious to hear your side of it as a PC gamer more than a console gamer, especially in this day and age, because obviously that's a system that's far less defined by I would say hardware iteration. PC obviously is in its own way because you buy parts to upgrade. But obviously when I talk about home consoles, there's a very clear line of right, we're done with this, we're on to the next one. But when it first started, at least for me, when I try and think back about it, it did feel like a big thing at the time. And I think that it probably wasn't the first time that the term was used, but I remember it being very prominent around the time of the PS2 more than anything before that. Because the jump from, the Super Nintendo to the 64 and the PlayStation 1 and the Saturn and stuff like that was far more just about, very clearly, we're going from 2D to 3D. The future is now we have polygons, look at Bubsy 3D and deal with it, I guess. I could be wrong about this, and maybe I was too young, but I don't remember talking so much about image quality like we do now with 360p and onward, which would have been at the time or whatever, and onwards. It was more just about 8-bit, 16-bit, 64-bit, and then 3D. And then when we went from
bigger
PS1
the number, the better it was. Yeah,
which is very true what it is now, isn't it? But then it was just 2D to 3D. But after that, there wasn't a measurement of number for a little while. It was just kind of, we're moving from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2. And I think the way that they kind of just sold that was, it's next gen. Everything looks the same as it did before, but way better. And some games have widescreen, that was the big thing, occasional widescreen. But it wasn't as clearly defined as 2D to 3D was. That's when I remember next gen being a thing.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the PC, because with PC, things happen basically 7 to 8 years before anybody else does it. Especially back then anyway. So I've always thought of next gen as it represents a leap in tech and performance. It's been I've been a PC gamer for most of my life. From the time that I had a paper round, I saved up for a year. That's how old I am. People did paper rounds.
Oh my god, thanks for that flashback.
I bought my very first PC with my paper round that I saved up for. And in a way, you could say I still have that same PC as it's evolved over decades now for nearly 30 years. I continuously upgraded it, like with games, as games, programs, hardware has advanced. And I think it stands as a testament to each generation of tech that has come and gone. And when I was writing this, I thought there's something magical about that. This it's not a little PC anymore, but it used to be. This PC to my right is a little bit of a time tube. You know, it's I could pick every piece that I bought for that PC and go back, you know, to the mid 90s. It has a paper trail for it. But yeah, I should say as well, like I was mostly on the outside looking in when it came to console generations. I only ever picked one up on a whim if I wanted to try out an exclusive, as back then I wasn't as precious about non-exclusivity as I am now. But then it actually kind of had a foundation, because I mean there are certain systems that literally couldn't play some games, you know.
There was a line in the sand where it's like, we're able to do parity now. Like games are going to release on more than one system. Up for a certain point, you bought a system, you weren't playing anything on the other one, pretty much. So
I usually bought consoles usually in secondhand as well. Like the last system I bought, other than the Switch, because I don't count it because everybody's got a bloody Switch, but I think it was a PS3. And it was like in 2015, and it was because I wanted to play all the Assassin's Creeds and the Uncharted series. And then I never bought another console again, pretty much. It's been 10 years now and I haven't bought a console, a full generation. Again, in terms of PCs, there were times where I had to sit back and marvel at how far we progressed. Like there's a lot of core memories, you know, like my very first solid state drive. Like, I still remember the feeling of instant time loads. You know, it was like, what is happening? It blew my mind. Universal sockets, like USB, like that's a huge thing. Like when it came out, like now, like beforehand we had proprietary sockets, you know. You had your PS2 mouse. You also had a keyboard-specific socket. Every console came with its own proprietary, like, socket too. Plug-and-play devices. I don't know if people had you guys had PCs back in the 90s and maybe early 90s, but plug-and-play wasn't a thing. You couldn't just plug a hardware device into your PC and it would work. Like, you had to do a lot of stuff to get it to work. But when plug and play came, amazing. And then there was motion based tech as well, like with the Nintendo Wii, and I think it's like the third or fourth mention I've said now, but the PlayStation iToy as well, which stole countless hours of my life, and I have absolutely no regrets about that. I've been there as these technologies are first launched, and like installing them firsthand into this machine that sits at my feet. Like, and there was something special about being among the first to experience something like that, something new. But back then, like, graphics weren't really a big thing for me, as much as they are now, which is strange because normally it's the other way around. But yeah, no, I knew that it would get better. Maybe that's why, because I knew that things would get better, and I had that hope. In the end. But yeah, I've rabbited on enough about my PC. What about you, Kels? What's your journey with next gen, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I think you both specifically mentioned, really, for all of us growing up, it was always about the leaps. And that is, you both touched on things I was kind of going to say. But I can think of a few things specifically that still stick with me to this day. And it's funny because before PS5 and the Xbox Series X launched, you know, console specifically, I actually made a YouTube video called Remember When Next Gen Used to Be Next Gen. and sort of talked about all these kind of things. And we are just so far removed now from these days of, where you would see Mario and Sonic in 3D for the first time. And you mentioned the jump from PS1 to PS2, and I can think about games like, if you look at Metal Gear Solid 1 to Metal Gear Solid 2, look at GTA to GTA 3, even our beloved Resident Evil PlayStation 1 games to like something like Code Veronica. And there is an example I always cite where I was kind of, you think about these wow moments and stuff that really blew you away. And there was stuff earlier than that as well. But I remember when a friend of mine brought his PS2 round to my house with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and the PS2 version. And I played it and like was just blown away at how good this game was and how good it looked and all the customization options and all the levels and all the music. And so I was like, great, I'm going to get Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 for Christmas. But I only had a PS1 still, so I got the PS1 version. And you compared that, I felt like I was playing like a demo build of the game. The jump between PS1 to PS2 was insane. There was like missing characters, missing music, missing options. There was no draw distance. It was just, and that's kind of the thing that converted me to PS2 back in the day. But then even non-specific things, like we think about jumps between generations, and think about just what adding a DVD player to the PlayStation 2 did.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That's the biggest one, definitely, isn't it?
For home entertainment, for gaming, like DVD players at the time were like pushing 400 quid. And so, sometimes more expensive. So you were better off just getting a PS2 that came with a DVD player. And that converted, a lot of people's living rooms and the way they experience movies and games. And that is a generational leap that's not just game related, that's hardware related as well. And James, you talked about all the sockets and stuff like that. I think that is such a big one. And then even, the implementation of Xbox Live and first person shooters coming to console and Halo, all this amazing stuff, these big turning points. And we're just in an age of iteration more than ever. And this is not just games. Like you can track innovation in movies, music, and games, like right from the early 1900s up to the year 2000, and then it just kind of stops. And then everything becomes iterations. With music, it was the invention and use of different instruments and genres and experimentation, and everything since about 1999 has then been an iteration of a previous genre before. And it's the same with a lot of technology. Think about the last piece of technology that came out that really blew us away, and I'm not a big fan of Apple these days, but they changed the world with things like the iPod and the iPhone and stuff like that. And consoles were doing the same as well. But then we get to really like the Xbox One and PS4 generation, and it all just, even before that, it's kind of stopped. And in my honest opinion, if I think now of all those big wow moments and stuff that we think about when we think about next gen, in my honest opinion, when and Lord strike me down dead if I'm lying, I think the last time that there felt like a generational leap and truly there was innovation being done with something that massively backfired was the Xbox One. And what they were doing with Connect 2.0 and smart home experiences is something that nobody wanted at the time, except for me. But now it's something that everyone takes for granted. And it's how we all live our lives with Alexa and stuff like that. And they were just kind of ahead of the game, and it bit them in the ass because nobody was really ready for it. And, you could say, all right, the Switch was maybe innovative and that was a big next gen leap, but it wasn't. All Nintendo were doing was just kind of combining their two platforms that they had into one. And Sony had done stuff with Remote Play and the Vita before then. And then you think about now, there's the Steam Deck, which is quite innovative, but it's all this is a return to the form factor, that it's just a beefier version of something we've had before. So we'll talk more about what next gen is today, I suppose. But thinking about the past, those moments are just kind of, they're so few and far between, and we just live in that iterative generation with everything, as I've said. And I miss that. It's a shame that nothing's as innovative anymore. And so many huge moments. And I'm glad you said, James, like we're old and we've all lived through it. I think, not to big ourselves up, I think that gives, that gives credit and weight to what we're talking about here. We
I agree.
are that generation that experienced everything coming in, and everyone growing up today does not have that. And they're sort of a bit spoiled as far as I'm concerned.
What you said there about iterative and the sort of strange state of things almost feeling a little bit like they've ground to a halt really made me think of a lyric that I really appreciate. This is a weird tangent, but it just came to mind. There is a song by my favorite artist, Jamie Lenman, called Six Fingered Hand, which literally opens with a little rant about that, where he says, I remember when I was a kid, the past century seemed special. All the decades were lined up just like a set of colored pencils.
Yes.
The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, oh, they all look so exotic. I was certain the years yet to come would be just as exotic. And then he goes on to say that basically, when you look back at things from the year 2000, it doesn't feel like we really made a lot of advancement. And I think more specifically, he's talking about music, obviously, because that's the world that he occupies. I think gaming doesn't necessarily apply wholesale to that, but it has slowed down since the 2010s onwards. Definitely.
I was going to say, like when you were mentioning kind of the way the Kinect came out, I remember being more invested. I think it was the PS2 or the PS3 when HD CD came out. Was it?
Yeah.
On the
HD,
Xbox?
DVD.
And DVD or Blu-ray. And I was so invested in this competition for some reason. It made no sense because I got neither platform. I was like, oh, this is so interesting.
It was different though, wasn't it? Like, it's one thing to have the quote unquote console war, but to see them both sort of reach out across the aisle and compete for something else that combine and as to your credit, Kelsey, to a certain degree, the fight for sort of like who was going to be the center of the home entertainment center of your home. It was definitely about that. So I think it was because we'd never seen anything like it before.
So you just mentioned the 2010s, Si, and it brought again, like maybe because I have the perspective of a PC gamer, but I remember back in 2012 or 2013 when the graphic engine Frostbite was announced.
Oh yeah.
And everybody was like, "Oh, look, this is amazing!" And then one of the first games to come out on Frostbite was Dragon Age Inquisition, and I was blown away. Except I only had a 660 Ti, and for those who don't PC, wasn't very good. So my Inquisition experience wasn't fantastic, but I still got the experience. It was still better than Dragon Age 2. It was still better than Dragon Age Origins. It was better than anything that year. And that, I think, other than recently where I've been playing The Witcher 3, which granted has had a next gen update. I say that with italics, by the way. I think Frostbite was basically the last time where I got excited about that stuff. I see, because now this will go into other subjects, but we're focusing on hair, the finer details of hair. We've already figured out water. Fire was a big deal at one point. It's not anymore. We've gone past the struggle. So we've kind of got to a halt. Other thing I was going to mention is none of us go over to our friends anymore. We don't go over to our friends because they have, I remember I have a very clear memory in my mind about playing Star Fox 64 at a friend's house, and we played for hours, and I would go down there every week. I've spoken about this before on the podcast as well. We had a family PlayStation, and every Friday the family would come round and we'd play games like Silent Hill and Tomb Raider and Splinter Cell, and it's why I've only played Silent Hill 1, because that's the only game we could get at the time. We don't do that anymore because there's no reason to. That's kind of sad in a way, but I get why it's happened, but it's also sad because our social interactions have kind of lessened because of it. All right, we've gone for 20 minutes about this. Let's move on to the next subject. So the next question is like, have we reached a point with graphical improvements where the term next gen can no longer be clearly defined? And we've touched on it a little bit. But I'll start off here. This particular question has been on my mind for ages. And I mean, before I even started doing this, and I'm sure it's weighed on us all, but not in the same way. But like, while we know that next gen has always revolved around hardware, how it pushes boundaries. What often sticks with people is like more as a byproduct, really, is how something looks. Forgetting like that aesthetic, theme, and style is what makes a game incredible. It's what makes it important. Not necessarily the raw detail of a game's visuals or how it plays and whether the overall theme fits its own, again, italics, shell. And like a perfect example of this, by the way, is back to back, we've had games of the year, like that we've had recently. They weren't games that like boasted incredible fidelity graphically, that is typically associated now with next gen. Like, we see bloody Call of Duty videos and they're like, look at the way the cloak wraps around the knees, it's like, we don't care. Is the game good? It's like, yeah. So like, even though these games, these games were released, they had performance issues, and they still have performance issues. And I'm talking Baldur's Gate, I'm talking Elden Ring, last year's Astro Bot, that didn't have performance issues because it's Sony. But like what they did, like they beautifully crafted a world and the gameplay, and it resonated deeply with everybody. And I think we are like narratively, I think for me, how we've leaped is like that I've seen, especially like with Resident Evil as well. It's been how narrative has been held and and put into your game, like characterization, that kind of stuff. We never got that kind of stuff back in the past, and it's mostly because we get actual directors and casting and proper producers on games now. But yeah, next gen, it carried a lot of weight at one point, like we've mentioned, but it feels like we've definitely reached a plateau. I made a Blue Sky post about this recently, and from a tech perspective, we're advancing so fast now that it's difficult to keep up. Like, by the time a game reaches mid-production, we've already leaped like 3 to 5 gens ahead in raw power. And like, while pushing for progress is essential, like, for me, it raises a question, like, should we stick to single generation systems? Like, I'm not sure, and it'll be something we talk about later on. What I'll be talking about, we can discuss. But yeah, that's my bit about the question put forward. Kels, what do you think? Like, have we reached a point where the term next gen has become a bit muddied?
Yeah, I think, you said a lot that sort of, I think about a lot as well, and I kind of agree with. And, for me, I just think graphics specifically, they're just almost irrelevant in terms of a generation now. I think that's been true for gaming since the launch of Xbox One and PS4.
Yeah.
Fidelity and frame rate is one thing, but if you can look at games from 2014, and you said The Witcher had an upgrade and stuff, but you can look at games from 2014 and a few years after that look graphically as good or sometimes better than today, even in their current forms. Then I think about games like Rise, Son of Rome, MGS5. You mentioned The Witcher, and you joke about Call of Duty, but if you want to talk about graphics specifically, yes, they are games that have always pushed graphics to their limit.
Yeah.
But if you look at a Call of Duty game from 2014 to today, it's like the jump is still minimal, and this is over a decade sometimes of time. And then you think about 1999 to 2001, it's just, it's insane how big the jump was back then. And I think there's rare exceptions where graphics still can blow us away. And I think of things like Hellblade and Callisto Protocol, the Horizon games as well, which I think are some of the best. Still Wakes the Deep as well. Some of the best looking games out there. But that's just, that jump is so small. So to apply that to the term of being a next gen is, I don't think it's even something that the platform holders talk about. I think again about when the last consoles launched, it was all about the SSDs and stuff like that. But when you think about graphics and photorealism, like I don't need it to get any better. Like I prefer something like Alan Wake, which will use live action footage and video game models in tandem to deliver an experience. And for me, that's as good as it gets. And there's this argument that, okay, maybe something like VR could benefit from more photorealistic next-gen graphics. But, for me, that's a different conversation. And I think VR is still... There's some questions about VR in its current form, and it's until they get rid of the headset, like I'm sure it's always going to be this weird thing that maybe isn't as successful as it could be.
It's just not... I think that's the main issue, is it's just not accessible.
No, exactly. Yeah. And, faster load times of the SSDs, that is a big deal. It can be painful going back, so you can apply that to next gen. Like, that's a good selling point for next gen. But, I think we maybe heard it said a few years ago, but like Si said at the start, it's this term that we've had for a long time, which is just irrelevant now. And it's specifically with graphics is less relevant than ever because of all the other stuff that we can get onto about what next gen should be about and what it is about. But for me, it's just like, it's not it. And the other thing is, I think now it's being made clear more than ever that, a lot of people poke fun at someone like Jim Ryan, who says things like, we believe in generations and stuff, because that's just like not the case. And then now there's PS5 games being ported to PS4. And it's like, this tells you a lot about what you need to know about how they see generations and how they see you as a gamer and as a consumer and stuff like this. So, and it's nothing to do with the graphics. Because they wouldn't be porting a game to PS4 otherwise. So next gen is is definitely muddled, and it's it's going to feel like a bit of an archaic term. It already kind of does, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely.
So many good talking points. Where to begin? I'll tell you where I will begin. I'll begin with another quote from someone you may not have heard of, just some guy called Plato. Don't know. Who
Mickey Mouse's dog, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He the one time he did actually say some words instead of just going woof woof woof. Attributed to him, this quote is necessity is the mother of invention. And Kelsey, what you said there about Alan Wake 2, a really good example of a game that kind of, I don't know if visually stand out is the right way to put it, but it had its own identity in the way that you could pick it out of a lineup.
I think
and it grabs people's attention because of stuff like what you said, where it's got the live action and it has its own identity. Yeah. When you go back to gaming's past, it was like the real, and I know a lot of this podcast is going to come off as being really old and decrepit, but if you've listened this far in, you probably are okay with that. But all the classic, games from the past, very much like we did it this way because we kind of had to, and this is as much as we could do, and we squeezed every last drop out of it. It's true of Resident Evil, as we know. It's true of many great games and soundtracks and just all kinds of elements of gaming. And we've lost that a little bit now. But there are games that, like I say, you can pick out of a lineup, like a Hi-Fi Rush that looks like nothing else in the year that it came out. You put all those games from, was that 2023? Up against each other at the Game Awards or whatever. That's the one where you go, that looks like nothing else here. And I know indie is a whole other thing, but I'm talking about, the AAA sort of space at the very least. And that's always stuck with me. This is a weird one, but I always remember thinking when Zelda Wind Waker came out for the GameCube, just being like, this is probably never going to age because it's got the cel-shaded style, and some cel-shaded games have aged better than just because of the article effects and just the amount that's going on screen. And being that this is a Nintendo game and it had a certain amount of budget in it, Wind Waker has always looked very clean. even more so with the HD remaster. Obviously, I poo-pooed the idea of it existing, but when it came out, it was kind of like, yeah, okay, now this is definitely not going to age until the next big leap. But we've not had, that was the Wii U. We've not had the big leap yet. I don't think the graphical thing, we were very much spinning wheels. I don't care about 4K. I don't know if I see the difference. Ray tracing might as well be a myth to me. I think I've definitely said it in the server. I might have said it on a podcast, partly as a joke. No, it was true at the time. I don't really know what the difference was between 30 and 60 frames a second. Now I can see it, but still I don't really care enough for it to be a factor.
You're not alone either side. That's the big thing. Yeah, there's probably more people who don't care than do.
I can see the difference, and if I swap between them, it's kind of irritating because then I have to make a decision. But if a game tells me what it's going to, just goes in and says this is what it is, deal with it. I'm just perfectly happy to deal with it and start till I start tweaking with the changes. And yeah, James, you said a thing earlier about graphics. I think the thing for me is the number of interactable details and maps is the stuff that's really genuinely impressive over the last couple of decades. Not the overall look of everything, because Kelsey, you're right, like you go back 10 years and it's not enough of a leap to be like, this is a decade's worth of work. But there are some video game maps out there that it's just the small touches, the immersive details, the grass and the trees swaying, litter on the streets. Stuff that doesn't necessarily affect your enjoyment of how a game feels to play, but adds to that overall experience, which is really funny. Because there are so many games in everyone's mind that look a certain way. When you go back to play them, you go, oof, my brain filled in the gaps. Everyone talks about, everyone talks about Halo 1 when they brought out Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. And you boot it up and you go, this is the original Xbox graphics, right? And then you press the back button and it goes back to what it looked like 20 years before, or I guess 10 years before at that point. And you were like, ow, ouch. Same thing with Dead Space Remake when it came out. I was like, this is just what the game looks like. I don't get it. And then I played the original game. I was like, oh, yeah, no, they've done quite a lot of work here.
It's that Gandalf meme. I have no memory of this place.
yeah, kind of. So the smaller detail stuff, really cool to make that more immersive. Yeah. But the way that the companies talk about it being huge advancements in technology, and I vividly can think about the PS5 Pro trailer where they were like, the PSSR technology, spectral super resolution, it's got all these numbers, how many gigaflops, and it means nothing to me.
No.
It means nothing to me either.
Because the photorealism thing that we've gone in with so many AAA games is, unfortunately, it doesn't matter if they look the same as they did 10 years ago. They all look the same now because everyone wants to be the photorealistic one. Whereas I've just sat here and gone, remember Wind Waker, remember Hi-Fi Rush, stuff that had its own identity is the most important thing. And we lose so much of that when everyone is chasing, I want to be the game that has the biggest number.
Yep. Yeah. I was talking to Steve a few weeks ago now at his house about kind of nostalgia. And I kind of realized something, and it's not a negative or a positive. It's just how our brains work, and it's with between Resident Evil and Baldur's Gate. I asked Steve if he would play Baldur's Gate 1 because it's my favorite game of all time. Everything is hand drawn. It's all sprites, top down.
Mm-hmm.
He came back to me a week later and said, "Oh, it's not for me. I can't get into it." Right. And I just can't get on with that kind of the style. And I'm like, so that's how I feel about Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah. I love the look of Resident Evil, but I can't play it because of that. And I still love it. I still love Resident Evil 2, like in their own way. But yeah, like it just made me realize that at that moment, that we have those magical, like we fill in so many blanks.
Mm-hmm.
Like with gaming, I went back to Final Fantasy VII in like 2019. Was that
probably
20 years later? I was like, wait, this is not what I remember at all. I don't remember Q bombs. I don't remember, I don't remember any of this. So your brain really does fill in the gaps, and it's quite amazing. Our brains are quite amazing in that respect. Anyone else want to say anything else when it comes to next gen being valid? Like being a valid descriptor?
No, it's a dead term.
Yeah,
I think
dead.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that the companies now just wheel out, but people just are so numb to hearing it, they don't even think about the fact that it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
And to Kelsey's credit, and I was going to talk about this a little bit, it is very funny that, first of all, Xbox don't care about their own hardware, I guess, because their thing is now, and has been for a long time, it's a very interesting idea, service. They may have gone a little bit too mad with it by going, everything's an Xbox now. Don't bother buying an Xbox because everything's an Xbox. The reverse of that completely is that Sony have promised they care about generations, or they did however many years ago, which is completely different. Like, it's like they've gone, oh, Xbox is doing this, we're going to do the complete reverse. But they didn't. They didn't do the complete reverse, did they? Like this, the cart before the horse, PlayStation 5 library blows. I've had it since year one. It sucks.
Oh. Yeah.
There's like 2 games, I think.
Everything else has just been a re-release,
console's
right?
been out 3 years. I have 6 games.
Yeah.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
most of those games are probably on PS4 as well.
Yes, that's my point, yeah.
It's just like, what? I mean, it's James Emmy's capitalist message. But, like, turn that into a jingle.
That's like a cutaway on Sesame Street where they're just like, here he comes, James, and his capitalist message.
But it's like, but what I was going to say is, like, it's because it's easier, right? And it's easier to get it's easier to get the dollars. It's easier to get the pounds. It's like, oh, how do we get those easier pounds? It's by re-releasing the content with mediocre upgrades, And it's like, we're going to give you this game for free, but if you want blah, 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 then you need to pay £10 more, It's like, even D&D has started doing it where, this makes... Yeah, I will rant about this, but I'll just try and keep it short. But they... if you buy the physical book online of the new edition, if you pay £10 more, you get the digital book. Like, what? I've already bought the physical book. Give me the digital book. It's like, ugh, I hate it.
Relatedly, to slight also tangent rant, is the Doom, the Dark Ages special edition got announced, and it's like 200 and something or whatever quid. And it comes with a statue and a digital art book and digital soundtrack. So you're paying £150 to £200 for a statue and a disc. I think a disc. I assume a disc. In this day and age, you couldn't actually guarantee that.
And they'll sit there and they'll go, "You get it for free." Yeah. See what we're doing. See.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. See this
if you
carrot?
do get a disc, if you have the PS5 Pro, you've got nowhere to put it. But that's another thing.
Oh, yeah. Went for a little bit of rant there, but yeah. So let's go on to the next one. So we've spoken a lot about graphical. We've spoken a little bit about graphical fidelity and how dumb it is, and what it's meant to us, and how important it is, etc., and everything else. But with our final subject here, since we've reached this point of like near perfection with how a game physically looks. That's just an example. But what should next gen actually be representative of going forward? Like, and what does the future of gaming look like without a clear defining factor like next gen? Kels, you want to start us off?
There's loads of different ways you could go with this. And when I was thinking about this today before we started recording, I was like, really, like, this is one of those subjects that we talk about where you could do 5 episodes about this because, at the start you mentioned cloud, and I've got a few bullet points here and I haven't even got cloud in it because that is a whole thing. But for me, I think going forward now, we've decided, we know it's not, the graphics are lovely, but it's all about style. It's about delivering that experience. And I think if you want to sell me a new generation, it's about access. It's about preservation, forward preservation and backwards compatibility. It's about not letting gaming become a luxury hobby, which in some cases it's starting to be. And I've heard people call gaming a luxury hobby, and I completely do not get on board with that because, growing up, I've always felt that games consoles were, think of how expensive PCs used to be. Games consoles were the cheap way into gaming. They were effectively slightly expensive toys back in the day. It was never seen as a luxury hobby. Most people had a games console unless you were really not well off. And so it's never been considered a luxury thing to me. But there's times now where it feels like that's becoming the case when you look at £700 games consoles and stuff like that. And I think that's what I don't want to see next generation become. So it's still being accessible is what will sell me to that generation. And accessibility is important as well. I think if you're just from a game standpoint, if you're putting out a game today and I can't change the font size of the subtitles, then you've already lost me. So that's the stuff that I think is kind of important. And then you don't want to talk about taking a step back. I think these are these things you need to be hitting to sort of stay, kind of up to date and or forward thinking. Silly things like it annoys me when games don't have a photo mode as well. That's another black mark. But anyway, I will go to bat for Game Pass because I think it gets a lot of bad faith takes where a lot of people compare it to Netflix and they say, "Oh, look what this is doing to the film industry and stuff." And it's just, again, it's not accurate because Netflix is not the same as Game Pass. Game Pass is an additive service. You can still buy every single game a la carte. There's nothing exclusive to Game Pass. If you want to spend your money on a game, you can. Netflix doesn't let you do that. And people say, "Oh, Game Pass, it takes sales away from the developers. They lose out on sales." And it's like, no, they're taking guaranteed money instead of a risk on lack of sales. And I think, to be honest, if you're putting out a game where the success of your game and your studio hinges on like 5 million copies, then maybe there's something wrong with your budgeting and production pipeline. And, just to kind of kick it back to that side of things. And, indie games are killing it more than ever and showing that you don't need to spend 300 million to make a successful game. So for me, like keeping it accessible, and Game Pass is something that keeps gaming accessible to somebody like me who I can't afford to buy a new game every single month. I can't. That is just the way it is. So this is the world we live in, and these subscription models. And I'm somebody who has, in the past maybe been kind of painted as a console warrior, and it's not. I'm sort of fighting for me being able to afford to do what I want to do and to be priced out of video games. I'm already priced out of going to King music concerts. Sorry, I've sworn now.
You're good for more. That's fine.
I'm starting to get heated. There's loads of things I'm priced out of in life. And, like going to music gigs used to be something that I do all the time. And all right, it's okay. There's still small gigs you can go to in your local hometown and stuff. But I'm talking, I've seen big multi-million selling artists for like 30 quid a ticket. That's not the world we live in these days. It's £200 to sit in the nosebleeds. And so I don't want gaming to become one of these things that I get priced out of. And I see, I don't want to defend the giant corporations, but when I look at the decisions being made by a company like Microsoft and a company like Sony, I know which one is pricing me out of gaming and which one isn't. And we're figuring it out. And, these generations are changing. They're still trying to figure the way that they want to go. But I like things like Game Pass, and to see what the generation is going to bring. I was going to say next gen again. This just isn't a term. I just want it to be this ecosystem to be sustained, and I want the gaming industry to grow, and I want it to be supported, and I want to be able to be a part of it. And to see things like, Balatro getting nominated for the Game of the Year, I love stuff like that. And I think thinking about the future, it's just, okay, Xbox is moving away from hardware, but other people will as well. Is the idea of getting your games in front of everybody. It feels like that's Xbox's solution to not shutting everything down because they kind of have no choice. And you're going to see that more and more from other, platform holders as well, I think, in the future. So the next gen is an ecosystem that is solid and sustained and preserves what I already have and preserves stuff going forward and doesn't price me out of it. It's just kind of my main thing, really, because there's a million games to play in so many different ways, and I'd like to still be able to play the big games. And whatever comes out next, there's not going to be an Xbox Pro or whatever it is that we know of. There might be a handheld or something, but I look at something like the PlayStation 5 Pro and it's like, well, I can't get that, and that's a shame. And that's considered the next step of this generation, but I don't really know who it's for. So for me, next gen should be for as many people as possible. And that's what's going to sell it for me.
Agreed. Sai, where do you think we're headed into the
Oh my
future of
God.
gaming?
All my notes are just resemble like some crazed rant, so I do apologise if this is all
It's
over
a
the place.
Tasmanian devil. That's all that's on
Yes,
Sai's
sort of
notes.
cave wall scrawlings over here. I don't know, and I think the thing is, none of the big companies have a clue, which is why they have just gone power, 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 and not a lot else. And to Kelsey's credit, what you said sort of much earlier on about the Xbox One being this big flop, that actually, if it had released in another generation, much like we often talk about the Dreamcast being very ahead of its time, I do wonder if there's going to be something that sneaks up behind us that somebody once tried to put forward and becomes the unexpected. Oh, this is what gaming should be right now. Or if something just comes out of left field, another company comes up with some idea. Because I think Sony and Microsoft are so like locked in on what I said earlier about Xbox being the service thing, which is totally fair, and Sony balls in everything up right now, quite frankly, with their generations thing, which has not been the hard line they said it was. And they really need to pivot because the PS5 Pro seems to have been a disaster, and all signs are pointing towards the PS6 not being that far off. And the problem is, what I want it to be is some of the stuff that we've kind of mentioned is all those little innovations in the way that really make the generation special and contribute not just to that generation, but to just gaming moving forward. Like we talked about the DVD player thing in the PS2. Generation before that with PS1, yeah, sure, it did the big jump to 3D. That's the thing that everyone remembers it for. But also, yeah, to its credit, the two, not on the original console, on the original controller, but the re-released DualShock controller that had two sticks, which was a game changer. And then Xbox sort of refining that a little bit as well when Halo came around. But also the DualShock vibration, which was so good that other consoles had to sell separate vibration packs for your controller. Suddenly everyone was like, this is a game changer, which is so funny to think now because we just take it for granted. And that, as much as I have absolutely and will continue to use Sony as a punching bag in this podcast, I do love the DualSense, and it's because of the innovations, the haptic feedback and the pressure-sensitive triggers. Oh my God, the pressure-sensitive triggers. I need that in every controller going forward now.
I experienced that.
So good.
I experienced that for the first time with Kazan, the Kazan demo. I'd never experienced it before, but the Kazan demo on Steam has it enabled for the PS5 DualSense.
Awesome, that's cool.
And I had never felt it, and it, like you say, it was bloody amazing. It was awesome to feel. Playing
through Village after having played on the PS4, playing on the PS5, presumably paying £10 for an upgrade, like you guys have said. I can't remember now. But it was so nice to be able to actually feel... The guns in those games have like a weighty sound, and in gameplay they feel heavy because it's kind of a slower, comparatively to a lot of FPSs, obviously, game. But being able to actually feel that in my hand and the pressure pushing back from the, pushing the shotgun was stuff like that's really cool. And we need more small upgrades like that just are like immersive detail. Like I said, on the screen, but also off the screen. Nintendo are great at these little experiments, even if a lot of them don't take off. Nintendo Labo, looking at you. Does anyone remember that?
No, I don't.
That was their make things out of cardboard thing. Just died in the water, didn't it? But it was a really interesting, unique idea that you would only get in Nintendo. And at least they tried something. And I think that's cool that they're just always doing that thing.
Can I join in punching the bag?
Please do. I've got so much more. So just
I'll just add something extra straight to the head. The moment I knew Sony had no clue was when they released the PlayStation Portal.
That's weird, isn't it? What's
straight
that
to the nuts. They were like, "Let's go back. Actually, let's go back."
People loved that was them trying to be like, "Let's look at a generation I hated that maybe they'll like now. Let's just release a Wii U." Okay, weird guys, but fair enough. It's gaming is in a really strange space, and this is a more broad thing. But I hope indie and AA takes more precedence moving forward as the big companies sort of flounder around, don't know what to do with AAA, live service, so on and so forth. We've talked about indie taking over the space for a very long time. AA, it's kind of yet to be seen. Like there's a rise in AA and what that means in this era. very excited to see where that goes. But the casual audience, let's face it, I don't want to be gatekeepery, but they kind of are told about the games they should care about, and then they do.
Yes.
Call of Duty, you're not FIFA games, whatever they're called now. GTA, obviously. Anything that's marketed out the ass. Look at Cyberpunk. Huge for the casual scene. I know loads of people that are not big-time gamers that love that game. And it's not like it is an established IP, but not in a casual sense. Like, that was a fresh thing. Most of the people that play it probably have no idea what it's based on, but the marketing budget was it was insane. So it's stuff like that. But unfortunately, games like that set a precedent where everything else has to chase, like I said, the big number. And some of that is how much the game costs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk about how much GTA 6 is going to cost this year when it comes out. Is it even going to go as high? £1 maybe. And then that sets that, Kelsey, what you said, the dangerous precedent of gaming becoming an exclusive, what did you call it?
Well, just a luxury hobby.
Luxury hobby, yeah.
Which I don't think it is. I mean, it's starting to look like that way in some cases, yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see what happens when the PS6 launches, because you'll get loads of influencers doing their best Wojak shock face at the reveal, being like, oh, look how hype this is. But there'll also be loads of people going the other way. Fair play to them. I mean, it'll be kind of insufferable because influencers, but everyone going, why spend £600 on a new console once you've already spent £600 on the PS5 Pro? Well, we're not even. It's going to be more like £1,000, isn't it, the PS6? The PS5 has been a flop. They've got very little time to prop it back up before they're apparently going to release the next generation. Again, here we are, next gen. But it hasn't felt like there's been a next gen for so long. It's a very strange time in gaming. And I think generations now are potentially a harmful thing. The whole just rigid, it's time for a new console. PS5's been out a few years. Time for the next thing, because just the entertainment industry is just, right, this game coming out in 4 years looks this good. We must immediately work on the next one. And it's like, no, make use of what your console can do. Because no big game that's come out in the last few years really has worked the way that it's supposed to on launch day. Because all the companies are too busy sort of scratching away at the next big number that they can reach. Like, who cares? 240 frames a second. What does that even mean? You know?
Split screen.
Bring back split screen.
No. Let's not bring back split screen.
But you want to hang out with your friends.
No.
It's a house.
Right now, I am the capitalistic message. Okay, no, let's not bring back split. It's dumb. Split screen is dumb, guys. You're never going to have it. In fact, we're not going to have it on launch. We're going to wait for everybody to get mad, and then 6 months later, we're going to add it to our video game.
I'm so glad you said that, James, because again, that is just a perfect example of this stuff that you see online that people kind of use when actually it's so not important and it's not, like it's not optimal and stuff. And then I look at something like the Switch 2 that's coming out, right? And there is rumors that something like the Master Chief Collection is going to launch on Switch 2. That means that we can have Halo 2 LAN parties in our living room again. We don't need to have giant TV.
Oh my God.
We don't need to bring loads of consoles. Everyone's going to have Halo in the palms of their hands. And that's the new split screen for me, if you like. So to get hung up about, local play for something that 7 people are going to use, it's just and I'm somebody, I play games with my son and we play games together. We play Minecraft in split screen and stuff like that, but it's just I can see value, but it's it's not the thing to get angry about, like you just said, and it does wind me up.
So every year on New Year's Eve, my friend has a birthday party, and for about 8 to 9 years now, I've gone to his house. And every time I go to his house, I always ask. His name's Aaron, and he's also a friend of mine and a content creator. Azavar, shout out. But I go to his house, and I bring all of my Switch things. So I bring my my Joy-Cons. I bring my controller. I bring my DualSense if we need it. That is something I do that once a year, and it makes my year, and it's at the end of the year. And it's like I want to do more of that. So like having the convenience of a handheld like that, is all people want. I like having that, like we were saying earlier, I like having 60 frames per second. I like witnessing 4K, but I was playing Witcher 3 for over 120 hours in 1080p, and it was fine.
I tell you what. Sorry, James. Go on. I'm just going to finish.
It was just nice. It was nice to see that upgrade. It's like, yes, but we're still at that point where it's not super important. I know we're trying to strive for that, but it's just, it's not important.
The word convenience there is really accurate as always. Like, that's something that where the improvements are made is actually really worthwhile, making gaming more convenient for everyone. And convenience includes don't arbitrarily attach prices to things that would be convenient. They should just be free because convenience. But you talk about, we've all said about maybe there's been a lack of innovation in the last couple of generations. And I do think every time a new console or an upgrade comes out, they're like, it's going to have zero loading, and it's always not, nowhere near how good they say it's going to be. But to that point, the innovation in terms of convenience in the last few years is the ability to just resume games at any moment. Just be like, back into the menu, turn it off, and then you just come back, days later, turn the console back off, and you're immediately right. But that's great. That's a cool little innovation that we've had that's come courtesy of all the extra power. Stuff like that makes our just experience from PlayStation to PlayStation better. Not just I have the bigger, shinier map and such, like we've ranted about several times over. Stuff like that is really, really cool.
Yeah. Just quickly, I think about how you think about sort of, like the median age of gamers and us lot that grew up in a time where we were kids and where we saw this come in. And many of us now, and it's not that there's people who don't game that aren't young and people who don't game that aren't older than us. And there's people with different lives, different responsibilities and different households. But if you think about an average household with the youngsters that we were, lots of us have grown up and might have jobs or families that have, we don't really have the bedroom that we go to after school where it's just our TV and our console. Now, I'm lucky to get
same.
People do. But I know that there's a lot of people that are very lucky to get, to occupy some time on the good TV in the house. So to have something like a handheld, like a Steam Deck, like a Switch, like these rumored handhelds that are coming out, that's like a godsend because that is the convenience. And also we're past the days of where those handhelds just had sometimes kind of crappy versions of their bigger console brothers. Now you can what you just want is your game that you were playing on your console. You want to be able to pick it up and play it in your hands. And I think we're going to see that more and more and more. And for me, that is just, that is what I want from next gen. And if Switch 2, like I say, Switch 2 is going to launch with its, obviously it's Nintendo IP, but if it's this stuff about it potentially bringing, the Master Chief Collection is 10 years old. The Gears of War Ultimate Edition is 10 years old. I'm going to be picking up 10-year-old games on day one with a Switch 2 if it launches with that for the convenience that you just mentioned. So I can't wait for something like that.
Steam Deck is bought one last year. Fantastic bit of kit, but convenience is a good reason why. Not just the convenience of it being a handheld machine, which is always the case, but just the fact that I could be playing something on PC. And we didn't really talk about it, but we did mention it, cloud save, and then just pick it back up on the Steam Deck at any time. That's really, really cool. There is one thing, and I apologize, James, if you wanted to head in the direction of wrapping this up, but I did kind of want to ask the questions we sort of touched on earlier about with Steve and his Baldur's Gate experience. I do wonder a lot about that. Kelsey, you just said about our ages, but with younger generations, like, are they able, how capable are they generally, obviously I'm sure singular cases, of going back to older games? Not even necessarily from our generation, but even just from when they were growing up from 10 years ago. Or do they go, I can't play this because this game looks really bad now to my eyes. This is what I've seen growing up. Is it different for them? Obviously, we don't have the answer because we're all similar age. I do wonder about that. Like, maybe they're more in tune with this sort of graphics push that we've kind of poo-pooed when the next one comes out. Do they think, I can't play this because GTA 6 looks so good that everything else is hard to go back to? Or is that just what companies want you to think that gamers think? I don't know.
Well, obviously there is bias there. And please, if there's anyone watching this and you're like, you're going through the current gen or the gen before that and you have something to say, please let us know because we're very interested. Obviously, because we're old people, so, we are irrelevant. To give an example, like Final Fantasy VII, the way it looked is not how I remembered, so I immediately put it down.
Right.
And what I was thinking when you were saying that, I was thinking the way I would before playing that in 2019, the way I would describe some Final Fantasy VII to someone would have been much similar to the remake, like, and how I experienced it, like in the narrative pushes and stuff. It would have been much more closer to that and how I imagined it than the original Final Fantasy VII. I think if people went back to Final Fantasy VII, they probably wouldn't play it. Maybe because of, there is a young retro community out there. They play it simply because, well, not just because, but it has that age to it and it has that charm, that charisma, or riz, as they would say. But that's just my bit anyway. Because I mean, I do have the bias of going back to it and go, whoa, this is not what I remember. So a new person going back to it, I will go, oh, this is nothing like that guy told me.
100%. I'm not going to name names. I have a colleague at War Culture. Many people will be able to figure out who it is if they are followers of our channel, and we might even make something out of this, but he told me over the Christmas period that he went back, he just turned 30, and he just went to play Mario 64 for the first time because he came in, I think, at the PS2 was when he started gaming. So he didn't play Mario 64 before. And he just said it was like, I don't know if he described it as borderline unplayable, but that's the feeling I got. And I'm like, you are mad. Like, that is one of the most perfect games of all time. But again, I'm speaking from someone that kind of grew up with it. So I would say that. So it's very curious.
Yeah. Okay. So what do I think, like, of the future of next gen with gaming? I think the concept of next gen needs to be repurposed. It needs to be changed, like, from what it currently is, because what it currently is right now is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Like, we haven't quite reached perfection with how games look, but they're still close to perfect, so it doesn't matter. Like, generation, like, when it comes to that, generations it doesn't matter. And like, with this decline in innovation that we've had, people are also, this is incredibly important for me, people are becoming less excited to invest. Like, they don't.
Yes.
Like, you need to be excited. That's what brought us to all these innovations when they come out. Like, oh, if you do you have the new iToy? Do you have the new Nintendo Wii? It's like, that was excitement.
You're so right as well. I hate how right you are, because I cover this for a living now as well, I feel somewhat obligated. The Nintendo Switch too, I will be excited about, because Nintendo actually know what, like, they have a plan. They actually kind of have an idea what they're doing. PlayStation 6, when it comes out, I'm going to buy it out of I'm going to resent the fact that I have to buy it. You're 100% right.
Yeah, like, it's just, I've just not been excited. Like, even, like, okay, to bring it to PCs, I've not been excited about, this is going to sound really, like, nerd porny here, right? But I've not been excited about a graphics card since the 1080.
No, and James, you've switched to cloud, like, as well. So
yes, like, there's no reason for me to be excited. And also, graphics cards are £2,000 now.
Nonsense.
We need excitement, we need choice, and like you said earlier, Kels, we need accessibility to all games available in perpetuity everywhere.
Yes,
that's how it should be, and that's one thing I applaud Xbox for, is that they've started doing that. And even though Switch, Nintendo have been really crappy with, like, removing stuff and, like, taking court orders against people who were working on projects that aren't even available anymore, they did start to put some games that I did not expect on the Switch, as well, like The Witcher 3. We was talking about it earlier on,
right?
Like Control. I mean, Control was a cloud thing, but like, with how stagnant gaming has felt in recent years, other than a couple of shining lights, like, every year, like pre-2014, every year there were, like, bangers. And then when I look at Games of the Year nominations now, I go, oh yeah, there's 2 games there I've heard of that are pretty good. The others I just didn't really, there's the again, excitement gone. So it's like, the players have, because of all this, players have, like, turned to nostalgia now, which is fine. revisiting childhood favorites. And we got developers like, what we cover with Capcom. They've reignited those flames with excellent reimaginings, like proving how powerful revisiting and reinterpreting like the past can be. And then that in turn has led people to play those original games, in some way.
More people would play them if they're available in more places, to your point.
Yes.
But like choice, it's about more than nostalgia, though. It's also about how people want to play. Gaming corporations, they need to pay attention to what's happening. Like, they really need to, because again, we've said it multiple times, but they just don't seem to have a bloody clue. Only like a couple do. And even then, it's just like you're doing the bare minimum. Like ethical cloud gaming, because right now cloud gaming isn't super ethical. To the planet as a worldwide thing. And one of my big things is, I have said this once, I think off air at one point, modular systems. I want modular systems.
Oh my god,
that allow for easy upgrades. PCs, I don't like how hard I've been building PCs my entire life. I don't like how hard it is to make a PC for people who've never made a PC before. I don't like that I have to be brought in for someone to enjoy something. It's like to enjoy their game that they bought themselves. Imagine, like I was saying this to a friend a couple of days ago. Imagine you're at home, you have your Xbox 2, whatever.
Probably, to be honest,
the next one's going to be called, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have your Xbox sequel, and your mates just phoned you up, right? I'm just giving you a free advert here, Xbox. Your mates just phoned you up, and you're like, "Can you come to my house? Let's play this." You take blocks off your PC. Like, just simply take the off your Xbox. It will be a PC at that point, but take the blocks off your Xbox. Oh, there's a handheld. I could just slip these in, click those in. The Nintendo had it right with the Switch. I loved all the clicking and stuff. Then you bring that with you. You take it to your mate's house. You plug it in or you connect it up, right? That, for me, would be next gen. Being able to quickly piece things together, take things away, give you more access to things, making things like maybe, that's the 4K brick, stick that in.
Could bring my 240 FPS brick with me.
yeah. Remember to bring your 240 FPS brick, yeah.
I am gripping the arms of my chair here because you are absolutely, there's two things. You're absolutely correct, but also this is previous generation, because we've had this and we've had it taken away from us. This was memory cards. Even the Xbox 360 hard drive you could take off and take with you. I used to take because you used to have different sized ones depending on the Xbox you had. I had an Xbox 360 Elite that came with the big hard drive, and then my Elite Red ringed, and I kept the hard drive and put it on my just classic arcade 360, and being able to take that around with me and have all my game saves so I can take it to a friend's or whatever was amazing. Why have we lost that? And the other thing I wanted to say, and this is still the Sony kick them while they're down podcast, apparently, the fact that the people responded quite negatively to the PS4 Pro and they just did the same thing again this generation when they had a chance to plan ahead and do something like this. Imagine the positive talk where someone would like, we're bringing out the PS4 5 Pro, but it's way less because you just crack your PlayStation 5 open and just swap out this bit. Don't tamper with this stuff because that'll break your console. Fair enough. We've designed it in a way where the bit that you take off is obvious or whatever. Like that's the real kind of, that's what we talk about these innovations from system to system and that make you go, oh, that's quite next gen, actually.
Yeah. You want that.
The Sony need maybe they've rested on their laurels, and they might want to be careful because for a long time they've wanted to be the Apple of gaming. Everybody knows this now, and unfortunately, Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, even Apple aren't safe from regulators. You look at something like all this money, time, development, and tech, engineering they put into something like the lightning bolt. It's gone. It's gone overnight. Apple have been forced to switch to USB-C. The walled gardens are all disappearing, and Sony wanting the Apple-like walled garden, they're just a little bit too late to the game and locking everything behind a PS4 Pro instead of doing something like you've just suggested their site, or open sourcing. There's other things that are open source that are incredibly successful at the moment, certain social media platforms and such.
Something else that came out recently that tanked the US economy.
Yeah. You can't, this idea of a walled garden, it's gone. And, it's interesting to wonder, Sony aren't going to disappear overnight, but, bigger companies have fallen, and they do want to have a think about what they're doing, because like you said, Si, maybe they didn't think about it. They've just done the same thing again. And maybe they do think, actually, we can do this because lots of platform holders are raking in so much money from their takes and their cuts on things like Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft. Their little percentages that they get that just rakes in millions, that they think it doesn't matter. We can put the money into this, and maybe it isn't as big a loss to them, people not buying the PS5 Pro, as we think it is. But I don't know how long it can last, to be honest. Yeah, because many people out there don't seem to care about the PS5 Pro. And you talked about the younger generation as well. We know that there's many people out there that are still playing on their PS4s, and just because they don't need to upgrade to. It's another thing, actually, just before we wrap up in a bit, like that you mentioned two things when you said GTA 6 and Cyberpunk. So one of my best friends, Steve, has literally in the past 2 weeks bought a Series S because he wanted to be prepared for GTA 6, and then sent to me in a message a few days later, "Oh, are you into Cyberpunk? I've heard it's quite good." And I was like, "Yeah, it's quite good. I'm not sure you'd like it though." And I wasn't trying to gatekeep him. I was just explaining to him, it's not Grand Theft Auto, it's RPG heavy. There's a lot of stats and menus and stuff like that. Doesn't matter to him. He's gone and bought it. And it's just like, those two things that you mentioned is something that the casual gamer I have seen literally in the past week act out. And I know that this is happening on a big level. And I don't think a company like Sony, I'm not sure what they're doing to, kind of protect themselves from the interests of people. And maybe they think, maybe they've got the marketing deal for GTA 6 and that comes out and they say, this is the best place to play. But Xbox are going to be the ones saying, this is the cheapest place to play it. And I don't
that's what's more important right now.
Exactly. Because
I was going to say, like the ending of kind of some of my notes here was like, they need to read the room in terms of what people can afford. People can't afford every 5 years to buy a £600-900 machine.
Yep.
They can't.
People can barely afford to buy games right now.
Yeah. And we're constantly told, whether it's true or not, but we're constantly told that making consoles, development of consoles is way more expensive and actually puts these companies out more. That they don't make profits on consoles. So they need to take notice, or else, as you say, they're going to go into a slow decline, into failure, and it will happen. And it doesn't happen overnight. Empires fall over decades. But
look at Blockbuster. Like, there's somebody I point to quite a lot. They were like running the game, and they're just gone, completely gone, because they didn't adapt. Then you look at certain shops on the high street that aren't adapting. Our beloved Game haven't adapted. They're now packed in the corners of Sports Direct. It's depressing, and it's because they haven't adapted and they haven't evolved. And I don't think Sony are doing that at all. I think they're clutching on to the old way of doing things, and they'll be around a bit longer, but I think you'll see them change. I really do. I think that's going to happen faster than ever.
You had the new CEO recently saying that they need to find more ways, essentially saying they need to find more ways to make money.
Yeah.
Because they're losing such an incredible amount of money.
You can't spend $300 million to make Spider-Man and then make $50 million back on it. They won't do that. They just won't do that. That's not considered profit for them. And at the moment, that's what they're doing. And so they will change, and they will put their games in other places, I think. But yeah, like I say, there's just other stuff we could talk about for hours, I suppose.
I just, I like what Xbox is doing and what PC has done forever. what GeForce Now is doing and other cloud services as well.
Yeah.
You know, when I can play Baldur's Gate 3 on my phone, on my tablet. I can connect my PS5 controller to my tablet. Here's one for you guys. I can connect GeForce Now to my phone, and then I can connect my PS5 controller to my phone. Then I can cast my phone to my TV.
Yeah, I've done that with xCloud as well.
Amazing.
You know, that
yeah, of course.
That's exciting. That's like that's really cool, you know, and that is I think is going to be a part of our future, because games are an incredible piece of art. Every single game that is made, it is an impossible project. You know, they are so hard to make. So like, you know, get rid of exclusivity. You need to make things more exciting in other ways now. You know, you need to make it more accessible, like what Xbox is doing. The old model of like relying on new toys, you know, it worked for a long time.
The old model's gone. Nobody's playing with the new toys. They're all playing Fortnite. It's just they're all playing the old game.
Yeah, give them some bucks or whatever the heck they're called in that game. I don't know. It's just... But yeah, people, well, you know, as you can tell by this, we want something different, and everybody wants something different. People can't afford things anymore. You know, you can't afford all these things. You know, like one thing, I've sold a lot of people with this analogy, and it is, you know, and my friends, like my close friends, we have a group, and they called me GeForce Jesus. And it was because I said to them, they said, why do you use GeForce Now to me? Like, and I said, I'm going to say the same thing I said to you to an entire lobby of new world gamers who then agreed with me. And if you know gamers, you know, they don't agree on anything. You know, for a full subscription to GeForce Now, you know, every month, you know, over 5 years, you're paying half of the cost you would for a new PC. You know, and people are just going to get invested in that. Like, that is cheaper. It's more inviting. All you need is a good internet connection, you know. And more, I think, you know, the more successful they do, though, right now, maybe not, but the more successful they do, the more people are going to kind of replicate that and compete with it and make it better. You know, I'm not just talking NVIDIA. I'm talking other companies. They will try and make other cloud systems, like Nintendo tried to do, you know. And they'll keep trying to do. You know, Google started it first with Google Stadia, and that was a complete disaster because they went around it the wrong way. It was awful.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah. I'm not saying cloud should be the future, but I'm expecting it to be the future because, you know, the internet is becoming it's a service we all need now. You know, it's like water, even though we need to bloody.
It's a human right. It's a utility. You try and get a job without the internet out there, you can't. So the sooner it becomes a utility, the easier. Everyone's internet will be faster, and cloud will absolutely be. It may not be the primary. It will be the primary way for some people, but as an additive, it will be perfect, and it's pretty good now, and it will only get better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like a few years ago, I tried to do like looking for a job, for instance, even looking for a job, you know, a few years ago, I went around my local town center and tried to look for certain jobs around town.
Go knock on their door, put your CV in the hand.
Exactly. You can't do that anymore.
Just like how you got your paper round, James, to bring it full circle.
Oh, I just went into Mr. Rajesh's house, shop, and just said, "Can I have a job? Because I see you paper rounds." And he's like, "Yep, you can have it." But yeah, like that's how I've got many jobs. Like when I was younger, is I just walked into factories or like other places and just said, "Here's my CV." You can't do that anymore. It's like, oh no, this is all done on LinkedIn. It's all done online.
Yeah. Oh God, LinkedIn.
Yeah. It's like, no, F off. I don't want any of this.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a poignant point. Like you can't live in a world without the internet, and the fact that a lot of people are taken for a ride, and this is a whole other rant, you know, but yes, it is absolutely a utility and a human right, and people are ripped off left, right, and center, and we could all be living much more enriched lives if that fundamental system was changed, and it would lead right back to gaming and cloud gaming and all this kind of stuff. And I think it will happen. I do think it's a matter of time. We're going to see it in our lifetime. It's annoying, and this is the thing we said at the start. We've had to grow up. We've been caught in the transitional period for our entire lives. You think it might be quite nice to maybe be born in, well, say if the world's still here, born in 50 years when everything's sorted out and all the technology exists, and you lose a limb and suddenly you can get a new one. It doesn't matter. Like, we'll be on our deathbeds going, oh, we just missed the cure for this disease. It'll be too late. And it's just the so it sort of all links back to gaming could be a lot better if those other things were kind of rectified and made right, and maybe we'll get there one day.
Yeah, I'll be able to print my knees out someday.
Yes, gaming will be a lot better if gaming can kneecap you, because you could just grow your knees back and it'll be really amazing.
I mean, we're already kind of getting close to that, where we're getting like full haptic feedback vests and like where they electrocute you slightly if you get hit, and stuff like that. Like, I saw something today where there's this lady who's basically innovating it. Like, she was playing Skyrim. And every time she was doing a full like wizard run or mage run, every time she sets her hands on fire, she gets small like pins and needles in her hands.
That's really cool.
And it's so awesome. Like, that next gen again. Next gen. That's next gen. That's Anyway, anyone else want to say anything about?
No, we've been going way too long.
yeah. We knew this was going to be a long one, though.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for joining us today for this chat. If you have any thoughts or questions about next generation of gaming, let us know in the comments or in our Discord, where you will also get first-hand news from us. If you'd like to support the channel, consider signing up to our Patreon for early access to our content. And from all of us here at First Aid Spray, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.